Welcome to Penn State Dickinson Law's Profiles in Leadership series. My name is Darrell Lim. I serve as the H. Leddy Montague Junior Chair and Associate Dean for Research and Innovation at the Law School. This series offers an unparalleled opportunity to glean insights from top leaders who serve in government, education, the private sector, and civil society. In each episode, we invite these leaders to reflect on their journeys and share skills, core values, and qualities that make them the leaders they are today. We're very pleased to have Matthew Diller, Dean of Fordham Law School, and Paul Fuller, Professor of Law. He's one of the nation's leading voices on access to justice issues and a prominent scholar of social welfare, law, and policy. Prior to being appointed Dean of Fordham Law in 2015, Dean Diller served as Dean of the Benjamin N. Cardozo School of Law from 2009 to 2015. He began his teaching career at Fordham Law in 1993 and was named the Cooper Family Professor of Law and the co-director of the Louis Stein Center for Law and Ethics. Dean Diller worked as a staff attorney in the Civil Appeals and Law Reform Unit of the Legal Aid Society from 1986 to 1993 and was law clerk to the Honorable Walter R. Mansfield of the United States Court of Appeals for the Second Circuit. He earned his AB and JD degrees, both magna cum laude, from Harvard University. Widely recognized by the legal community and beyond, Dean Diller has received numerous awards for his work and scholarship. In 2021, he delivered the Charles Evans Hughes Lecture at the New York County Lawyers Association. Welcome.
It's great to be here with you, Darrell.
Thanks. I want to start with an announcement about an alumni event in Milan in June this year. In the announcement that invites alumni from Fordham Law to attend, it says that this is going to be your final reunion as Dean of Fordham Law School. So let's start at the end and just invite you to reflect on your time as Dean, but also talk about what leadership succession means to you, because I noted that you made an announcement pretty early on, 2023, that the 2023-2024 year would be your final year. What was your thinking at that point in time in deciding to announce it when you did?
So I'm happy to focus on the end first. And really a number of things went into my decision. Foremost was that I have been guided by a set of goals through my deanship at Fordham, and we were reaching a point where it was time for fresh thinking and a new set of goals and a new round of strategic planning and thinking. And I thought that we should have a dean in place who was going to be prepared to see that through. And I knew that that couldn't be me. It was just I would run out of energy. And also things were going well at the school. And I think it's better to stop at a good point than at a difficult point. And I wanted to give plenty of notice to everyone so that the university could do a full-on search and get its ducks in order over the summer to hit the ground running in searching for a new dean in the fall. And so that was really my thinking. And also the reality is I miss teaching and working with students in the classroom, something which I have not been doing. And I also miss feeling that I'm an expert in any one body of law. I've been doing law school administration for so long that I feel, there's a lot of stuff I know, I'm sure, but I no longer feel that I'm, an expert in a field of law, and I miss that.
So, if presented with the right opportunity, is it possible to see you in an administration in some other role in the future?
No, I mean, not in a leadership position in terms of, being a dean or a provost or anything. I think I've gotten that out of my system, and I'm glad I've done it. I've had a great run, but at this point, I'd really, rather spend my time working with students. I would want to be helpful both to the new dean here at Fordham, who's Joe Landau, is fantastic, you know, and to others, but I don't see myself as being the point person.
What do you see, Joe? What do you hope that he will carry forth from your work and your legacy as dean?
So, you know, a number of things. One of them, and one of the things that excites me about Joe coming into this position is that he really understands the DNA of the school, and you know, values and loves the things about Fordham Law School that I think I love as well, and that my predecessors in the dean's office have loved too. So Fordham Law has a very clear identity within our community, and that's an identity that people are happy with, and is very meaningful to them. So I think Joe understands that and appreciates that, and yet will build on it and take it in new directions and new places.
So for people that are not as familiar with Fordham and its identity, can you briefly describe what that looks like?
Sure. So, you know, the way I think of us, in a way I think we're often thought of out there in the marketplace, is as educating, you know, very strong lawyers in all the traditional things that lawyers are smart in, writing, analytical skills. You know, we have super capable students academically. We are an incredibly competitive law school to get into, and yet Fordham students don't come at things with a feeling of entitlement. They don't take things for granted. They come in ready to roll up their sleeves and work and get the job done. And so there's this combination of having the intellectual depth in order to think broadly and deeply about law, and at the same time, a concreteness and sense of you know of people and the situation and common sense that I think is really special and is valued out there in the marketplace. And so when I've thought about things that we've done, it's kind of leaning into that identity of being both an intensely practical law school while also offering that intellectual depth and ability to get students to think expansively about law and about the possibilities in the legal system and legal profession.
And where does the Jesuit identity come in?
So what's interesting to me about the Jesuit identity, it comes in several ways. So the first, and in a way the most obvious, is a commitment to service. And the motto of the school is in the service of others, and a strong commitment to serving the public and the public good, no matter what one's job is. You know, so whether you're a legal aid lawyer or whether you're an M&A lawyer, this idea that service is at the forefront stems, of course, from the Jesuit tradition. And to me, by the way, that has, you know, a dimension to it, which is in part, you know, looking for the public good, but it's also the idea that law is a service profession in that traditional sense of a service profession, which is the lawyer is there to help others, and that the lawyer is not the center of the universe. I view that in kind of Copernican terms, that many, you know, law students have come through the educational system. The educational system is entirely built around the student. Everything is designed to meet the student's needs and to help prepare and develop the student. And you go out there in the real world, and it's no longer about you. It's about other people and others. And so I think the Fordham ethos of service is one that helps prepares students for that transition, and is one of the reasons why we're successful. The other dimension, I think of the Jesuit tradition that is really important to the DNA, is the value of community and the feeling. And by that, I don't simply mean being nice, although being courteous and nice is part of it, but it runs much more deeply than that. And it really encompasses the idea that we are all part of larger enterprises and larger institutions, and that we need to take care to nurture those institutions and the people in them, and to value them, and to understand that, you know, we're part of a larger organism. And again, I think that's one reason why Fordham lawyers do well out there in legal practice, is because they make great colleagues. And the one reason they make great colleagues is because they understand the importance of valuing the community that they're in, valuing their colleagues and associates, and learning from them and supporting them. And we hope that that starts here at the law school, and that all flows from the Jesuit tradition as well. So many of our students, they know that we're a Jesuit school, but they don't necessarily recognize all the ways that the Jesuit approach has actually permeates what we do within the building here, but it does.
And hopefully after they see this, they'll have a better idea.
Yeah, yeah.
In service of others seems like the perfect motto for a dean whose work is characterized by access to justice and social welfare policy.
So yeah, maybe that's not a coincidence. But the motto pre-existed me, of course, and and goes back a long way with our school. So actually, the motto goes back to the 90s, and was really framed by Dean John Feerick, who was an iconic dean for us for 20 years, and is still a member of our faculty. And it's extraordinary to have Dean Feerick still active with us, because he's kind of the living embodiment of the values of our school. And
What
so,
leadership lessons have you learned from Dean Feerick?
so I've learned a huge number of leadership lessons from John, and I'll give you a few of them. So one of them is humility. The idea that that you always need to keep an open mind, because you could be wrong about things, and we all need to be educated, and we all need to listen deeply to others, and to focus on trying to understand where people are coming from and what the perspectives are. The value of and the importance of keeping the larger mission in the fore at all times, of centering again on this service mission, and what is the legal profession for, and that we're all here to serve the cause of justice and the public good, and that it's a people profession, that institutions are not just abstractions, they're not drawings on an org chart and diagrams, they're people, and it's all about people, and that's always been a central value for John. The value and importance of showing up. John is ubiquitous and will always make the extra effort to be at events that are important to people, because he knows that it's important to have, that it's meaningful to them to have the dean presence, that there's something that comes with the role that goes beyond the individual, and to try and use that for good.
So I had the privilege and pleasure.
Let me just interrupt for one, because I've picked out a couple of important dimensions.
Yes.
John is also a superb lawyer and thinker, and scholar, and so there's a level of excellence that he also models that goes with it, because the community stuff is all super important, as you hear from me, I believe, but it's got to be tied to kind of a high set of expectations around excellence, because that's where that's why our services, that's why what we contribute is indeed valuable and important.
Indeed. So I had the pleasure and privilege of interviewing one of your predecessors, Bill Traynor, and he talked about leading a Jesuit institution and shared an interesting cultural aspect of Jesuit institutions, which is the fundraising wasn't really a focus of these institutions, and it's not particular to any one institution. It just seems to be part of the Jesuit tradition. As dean of Fordham, a Jesuit law school, has that been your experience?
I'm just I'm processing that for a moment. And by the way, Bill was a good friend, and I was associate dean for academics when he was dean, so he's both a friend and a mentor to me as well. And I have spent a lot of time fundraising over the past years, so I wouldn't say that it's not something that's important, because it's obviously key to helping to reach our goals and aspirations. I think what Bill may have been channeling is that it has not been as high a priority and high a central focus as it maybe could be or should be, perhaps. Given an ambitious set of goals, and it's not something that we come at naturally, but it's something that we've certainly come to as very important and central to moving the institution forward.
So when you decided that you wanted this job in 2015, or perhaps earlier on, you took the job in 2015, uh, tell us what went through your mind your first day in the office.
So I do remember the first day in the office, and now you can't see it, but I'm at my desk, which is cluttered with papers, and I remember that feeling of having the desk be completely empty, and of course it was coming home for me in many ways, because I had been on the faculty for 16 years and then left to be at Cardozo for 6 years, which I also loved. But coming back was, homecoming in the sense of all these colleagues who had started with me as junior faculty members, mentors over the years. And so there was a great kind of feeling of gratitude and responsibility, knowing that this institution has been, the object of tons of work and labor over the course of many generations, and that I was now tasked with this, with this critically important role, and I knew how impressive my predecessors were. So, and therefore that the expectations would be high. So all of that, I think, was running through my head.
It's been said that it's easy for administrators to lose friends when they become administrators, but much harder for them to gain friends. How have you navigated that?
So I think that that's true, by the way. And I also think, one of the things I've just seen, particularly for people who come up through the ranks into leadership positions, so that where you're the dean of a school, where you are a faculty colleague, is that your friends come with all sorts of expectations about how you're going to see things their way and do all the things that they have wanted to do, and maybe that you've talked about doing around the water cooler. And so therefore they're much more easily set up to be disappointed than the people you haven't had close relationships with, who maybe were suspicious or distrustful. And of course, once you move into the leadership position, you're everyone's dean, and you need to see the school much more broadly and think about it much more broadly. And so it looks very different. And so I think there is a way in which it is easy to disappoint one's friends, and hopefully not lose one's friends, and perhaps sometimes to pleasantly surprise others.
So, talk to us about the 2 or 3 things that you are most proud of having served as dean now in your second term since 2015. What have you, looking back, accomplished that you're most proud of?
So, there are a couple things that have been important to me throughout. And so I'll touch on a couple of them. So one, and these I'm going to be kind of broadly thematic rather than particular, if that's okay. So one is, as you mentioned, I was a staff attorney at the Legal Aid Society for 7 years, and I worked on the civil side, often with clients in crisis on issues and things that were extremely important to them. It was a lot of responsibility for all of us legal aid lawyers at young ages and at young levels with experience. We were dealing with issues that were vitally important to people, and I felt the weight of that responsibility. And so that has propelled me in many ways into how I think about legal education, which is that we want our students and graduates to get a sense that being a lawyer is indeed a great responsibility, that people turn to lawyers for things that are actually important to them, regardless of kind of what this frivolous things you read about in the newspapers. Odds are if someone is willing to pay for a lawyer or get services even through a legal services office, whatever the issue is very important. And that therefore how you do your job and how you think about your job is extremely important. And one of the things that I learned quickly is that not everyone does the job the same way. And so I worked with, lots of lawyers who were working on similar types of cases, and they thought about them and approached them in different ways. And some of them really went the extra distance, were super creative, felt this imperative to help and protect the client. And they were going to, I won't say stop at nothing, but they were going to do everything they could within their boundaries of our profession to help them. And others were more, I won't say casual about it, but we're willing to stop or give up at an earlier point. And so I think about, how do we prepare and educate our students to go the extra distance for clients and to kind of feel the weight of that role and responsibility. So that's one thing. In other words, the goal is to educate students to not just be lawyers, but to be great lawyers in whatever dimension and whatever field they want to practice in. So I focus on that. And then the other thing, which has really animated me for quite a long time, is, are many of the things that I started out by talking about, which is that it's about outlook and relationships. And so first, the excellence in terms of knowledge of the law and analytical skills, that's of course super important. That's a given. But a lot of what the differentiator is among lawyers are matters of outlook, and how they think about the work vis-a-vis the client, which I just mentioned, but also how they think about the institutions that they're part of, their colleagues, their community. And what I have seen and believe is that for us, the students who struggle the most are the ones who don't really connect up to the law school, to the institution, who feel outsiders, who don't establish close friendships, bonds, don't have strong mentors. Those are the ones who struggle the most. And law school offers many opportunities to excel in different dimensions. But a lot of them you have to, okay, so classroom grades, everyone has to do the classroom. If you do well, you excel in that dimension. Otherwise, it's a smorgasbord of activities and opportunities, and students have to dig in and seize those opportunities, whether it's moot court or journals or public interest organizations and service organizations or the affinity groups. There's lots of different ways to excel in law school and to demonstrate, what you can accomplish, and to establish ties and connections, and to come away from law school with a sense of your own empowerment and what you can do, and also with a pretty good story for prospective employers as to the skills and experiences you've gained. We offer lots of different dimensions, but if you don't partake in any of that, then you miss it. And so so students need to throw themselves into it and need to commit to it, and they do that most often when they're connected, when they feel an attachment to the institution, when they have friends, associates, they have a faculty member or an administrator who's a mentor and a support whom they can turn to. So a lot of what I've spent my time doing at Fordham is helping to make sure that our students feel connected, and creating avenues and points of connection. And so to me, particularly when I came into Fordham, I wasn't thinking about, particular areas of law to focus on, saying we're going to be the next great law school in X field. Not that might not happen, but my mission was to think much more holistically about the experience we offer our students and making sure that we make these connections, that our students make these connections. And from there, I was thinking of both, it is part of our tradition, and so historically we've been good at that as a law school, but it's a complicated world. It's a changing world. We are a commuter school. The overwhelming majority of our students commute. We're in the New York City metropolitan area. They often commute from far, and there's so much going on in their lives and the community around them. And we're a big school. We're one of the 10 largest law schools in the country. So if any school is going to have trouble with students feeling connected, it's going to be us. And so, so I started with a real imperative to help students make those connections and form those bonds.
Thanks. Speaking of connections, how do you stay connected to faculty, student, and staff amidst all the things that you're doing?
Yeah, so that can be a challenge. I will say it's particularly a challenge during COVID, obviously. And on students, I've tried different things over the years. First is, as I said, the John Feerick model, just showing up at a lot of things and being available and present, I think is very important. It's hard to be available and present at everything because there are only so many hours in the day. For students, I do a regular series of lunch with the dean or chats with the dean where I meet with students in groups of 10 to 15 students. And I have found that that's a good number to get a conversation going, because first they can learn from each other, but they're more willing to open up in a group than they are sometimes individually. And so I do those kind of throughout the.
Are they there in your office? Is that where
No,
you?
they're in a small classroom. We give them some lunch, and also we've done it. We do it sometimes. We mix up, and it's all sort of random students, which has advantages. Sometimes I'll do one with, say, all evening students, or all students who are members of affinity groups. Sometimes we'll target them more because groups of students have special issues and problems, and and concerns, and we want to give them an opportunity for that to come out and not get lost. But sometimes there's a benefit to mixing it up as well. So I do those pretty regularly through the year. And faculty and administrators, it's just by being around and coming to things and caring about what they're doing.
You talked about the evening program, and Fordham has a great reputation for its evening program. Is that something that was uh, a focus and priority by design? And being really a top law school, as Fordham is, it's not that common for a school to focus resources on an evening program, but you have. So what's your thinking behind that, and where would you like to see it go?
Yeah, so I love the evening program, I have to say, and the evening program used to be, if you look back historically, it was originally bigger than the day program because we were a law school founded really for immigrants and people without means, and so the norm was that our students needed to work during the day and go to law school at night, and so the evening program was originally bigger than the day division. That has flipped, and it has flipped quite dramatically. Evening programs have really contracted around the country, and there are a number of reasons for that we could talk about it. But ours continues, and it's smaller than it was. But when we try and keep it targeted on students who are really working, which is the targeted population for it, and what it brings us is fantastically interesting students who are off doing all sorts of careers, and therefore bring different perspectives to the legal issues and problems that go on in the classroom. So to teach the evening students is hugely fun. And also being by far the best evening program in the region, and one of the very best in the country, we just get extraordinary people coming to the program because you have to be first, we're at the top of the market. And then second, you have to be extraordinary to want to go through law school and work at the same time. And it used to be, a matter of pure finances. It's not anymore. And the reason it's not is because with the availability of particularly merit scholarships, almost anyone who gets into our evening program can get a full scholarship in some other New York law school in the New York area. And you can also we're too expensive to pay for law school by working as a teacher or a cop during the day and going to law school at night. That used to be the model. A lot of civil servants, the numbers don't add up anymore, and so that's one of the reasons why the program is smaller. But for the students who come, they want the excellence of a Fordham education. They're willing to sacrifice to make it happen, and they're just extraordinary people.
So you talk about students just down back a few decades to when you first graduated. Harvard and near the top of your class in both instances. You had the world was your oyster. And had you wanted a career in big law, had you wanted a career in government, those certainly were options. You decided something different. What was you thinking?
So all through law school, if you asked me what I wanted to do when I finished, I wanted to work for the government. I was interested in foreign policy. I pictured myself going to Washington, um, and uh, and that would have been my goal. And what happened is I did this clerkship in with Judge Mansfield, as you mentioned, in the Southern District, and then my wife was my girlfriend at the time, was a year behind me in law school, and she then got a clerkship in New York. So we were going to be in New York for a couple of years, and I was looking for really interesting jobs that hit on important issues of public policy and made a difference in the world. I did look at government jobs principally, but I also applied to the Legal Aid Society. And when I went into the Legal Aid Society to interview, and that it just the work was really compelling to me and really meaningful and important, and the lawyers were fantastic, and so that's where I ended up. I had spent a summer at one of the big firms in New York. It was not my second summer, actually. My second summer, I was at the State Department in Washington. I spent my third summer because I didn't take the bar after graduating. I waited a year till the end of my clerkship. And so I spent the third summer at a big law firm. Didn't really feel it was for me. And what was interesting was they kind of assumed I would come back and never assumed I would talk about public interest work, and they never assumed that I meant it, and were somewhat shocked. I remember when I turned them down for the Legal Aid Society, but it was one of the key decisions in my career and in my life, and it was a moment where as you said, I had done well before. I had a lot of options, and by making that decision, it felt at the time that I was cutting off a lot of options, that I was closing a lot of doors that I didn't think could be reopened, and therefore making a real commitment and choice. And having said that, I would say a couple things about it. First is I loved my time at the Legal Aid Society. I loved the work. I had fantastic colleagues. I learned to practice law from them, and I feel I was trained by the best. And that's significant to me because many people before I went to legal aid said I really should go to a big law firm because of their training. But in fact, I had fantastic training at legal aid. And then the second is, I now see, of course, that my view of the world was far too narrow. That going to legal aid did not close off lots of opportunities to me, and that my colleagues who were with me at legal aid end up working in all sorts of fascinating jobs. Some of them are still at the Legal Aid Society, 30 years later, but some of them went off to do all kinds of interesting things. So the world is just a bigger and broader place than it seemed from the perspective of a 27-year-old recent law school graduate.
Speaking of students, you also recently addressed student mental health. Why was that a priority for you to talk about?
So that it's a piece of our other discussion about student connection and the attitude of the institution. Um, you know, our students are under tremendous stress, and they're under huge stress in part because of things we do in law school. It's the way law school is structured is stressful, and they are in competitive job market. So even if we try and channel, mutual support and cooperation, they feel a pressure. And that pressure doesn't go away when they graduate. Being a lawyer is incredibly stressful. In part, it's that responsibility that I said before of knowing that your clients are counting on you in lots of ways. It's not only clients, it's supervisors and colleagues. And also the work never comes in the right amount. When you're a lawyer, it's either you're overwhelmed with work or you don't have enough work. It never feeds through in a nice, pleasant level. And so therefore our students need to be able to deal with stress. And I think it's a complicated time in the world, and that also makes it stressful. And therefore our students struggle. And being able to confront that and deal with it early, and having your law school, educate you on the fact that you're going to have to deal with stress, and help you think of, help you find ways that that you can cope yourself, that work for you in dealing with stress. I think is really really important. And so we really have focused on those issues.
So, what would you say to those people that say it's a generational thing? People today seem to be softer, they expect more from society, they're more privileged, and the attrition process, whether through grades or through stress, is a natural way to whittle out people who are not meant for the job. And you keep these people in the job, they do badly in the bar exam, they pull down the reputation of the school later rather than sooner.
Yeah. So, so first of all, I have confidence in our admissions process. So I think everyone, we admit is capable of being a great lawyer. So I think, the ability and talent is there, and it's on us to help. It's partly on the student, of course, I get that, but it's also, on us to help nurture that and bring that out. And mostly what I would say in response to you is, in the past, people suffered in all sorts of ways. And so there's two ways to look at it. One is we should be preparing students for, the worst of the profession that they will encounter, and there's all sorts of, arguments that people make that stressful things in law school are good because they are preparing you for the worst in the profession. So the professor who cold calls students in kind of brusque and harsh ways is actually good training kind of thing. Or you can think about, how do you want the world to look, and how do you educate students so that they can go out there and help shape the world in a better way for the future. So I tend to, I understand the first, but I've tended to focus on the latter view.
Next, let's switch to talking about your relationship with the university. You did an interview called Leading with Authenticity and interviewed your president, Tania Tetlow. Reflect on that interview and what were some of your takeaways?
So I did that interview with President Tetlow in her first year, when she was a new president, and I was interested and eager to do it because Tania Tetlow is a lawyer, and a fantastically accomplished lawyer and law professor, and she's the first lay president of Fordham, the first non-priest, the first woman, and the first lawyer. And I sense in her and listening to her a very lawyerly approach to thinking about issues that I really appreciated. And she makes, a big point, leading with your authentic self to let herself and who she is be visible to everyone, and her opinions and what she loves and doesn't love known. She's very transparent in that way. And so I found all of that, interesting, and wanted to explore that with her. I don't know if that answers your question.
Yeah. What are some of the challenges or opportunities you have experienced working with the university as dean?
So I have to say, I have lots of great colleagues up at the university level, and could not have survived as dean, long without that. So, so the first thing I would say is being able to maintain the relationships personally is extremely important, and having a sense of shared values and common goals, I think, is extremely important, and that can get you through a lot of tough issues. Having said that, there are tough issues in the sense that my vantage point as dean is different, and there are challenging issues that they deal with as well. One of the things that Richard Joel, who was president of Yeshiva University when I was dean of Cardozo, said to me is that he wants a dean whose first thought is about Cardozo and how to make Cardozo thrive. But he would then continue to say, if bad things happen to Yeshiva University and Yeshiva University doesn't thrive, that's not good for Cardozo either. So there's a way in which the fate of the law school is deeply intertwined with the fate of the university. And if the university is thriving, that's going to redound to the benefit of the law school. And if the university is struggling, we're going to feel that as well. So that, as you can see, I'm saying this to you years later, that made a big impression on me. And so I realized that, my job is not simply to advocate for as much for the law school as possible, but also to realize that the law school in the long run needs to be tied to a great university. And I have both an obligation and motivation to help our university reach its full potential as well.
So the university is most of it based in Rhodes Hill, and you're based at Lincoln Center, which most people would think is an advantage because you're right in the center of where action is. But when you're so far away from the main campus, how has that worked in terms of the dynamics of face-to-face contact and getting things across?
So one thing that I realized during the pandemic, which I had not realized before, is that the head count is actually pretty much 50-50 between the Lincoln Center campus and the Bronx campus, because the Lincoln Center campus is not just the law school. It's a major unit of the undergraduate college. It's the business school, it's the social service school, it's the ed school. So we are part of a larger campus down here in Lincoln Center that actually equals the number of people up at the campus in the Bronx. So generally, it works fine. It's my time is principally at Lincoln Center. I do go to the Bronx pretty regularly for meetings up there. And the Bronx campus, I don't know if you've ever been there, Darrell, but it's incredibly beautiful and leafy. And so Fordham has this remarkable combination of a traditional Northeastern style, leafy green college campus, and a deeply urban campus that we are in Lincoln Center, right in the middle of Manhattan. And so that's a really pretty unique combination. And so, so I think that's an advantage in many ways. With Zoom, of course, I go back and forth slightly less, but I do spend time on the Bronx campus because, as I said before, the relationships are important.
And in developing those relationships, do you feel like you have to educate the administrators and the university deans and other colleges? Because in many ways, the law school functions differently from other units.
Yes. Yes, I think that's true, is that the law school is different, and often I feel there's a kind of a thought of law school exceptionalism, where we're different than the other schools. And we often do things differently and therefore ask for different things. So the most common and basic one is, student edited journals, scholarly journals, as opposed to peer reviewed journals. It's like that's a big head scratcher in most other parts of the university, or the fact that most of the currency is the tremendously long article rather than the monograph of the book. Again, those differences in scholarly culture are important, but there are other differences as well. And also the role of the law school dean is somewhat different than deans of many schools. Our alumni look to the leader, to the dean as their leader, and often see the president as a somewhat distant figure. And so in other parts of the university, particularly the undergraduate side, the president is a much bigger looming presence and figure. And so it's a different, it's a different relationship. And so I am often in the position of explaining, well, in the legal world, in the law school world, we do it this way. And I do that as, part of an educative function. The one thing I'll just say about this, and this again draws on my experience at Yeshiva University, which is when there's a medical school in the picture, that changes up the dynamic as well. Because without the law school, without a medical school, the law school is the one who's always exceptional. And, and we look very siloed and demanding and overprivileged, that's such as the view of us. When you've got a medical school in the picture, the law school is nothing compared to the medical school. The medical school, first of all, financially, is such a huge, force in a university that the law school is kind of a rounding error compared to the medical school. And then second, the arrangements and norms around medical schools are so completely alien to the rest of the university that, again, the law schools look relatively tame. I don't know if you've experienced that.
Yes, certainly. And it's something I hear often. Let's talk about work-life balance and one of your favorite pastimes, which is biking.
Yeah. So I
How
do love
does
to
that?
bike. Yeah,
Sorry?
I do love to bike. And I have no shortage of little hobbies here and there, which I find is, my way of dealing with stress. So I live in Park Slope in Brooklyn, which is where I've lived for 30 plus years, and we love the neighborhood. Um, and maybe 20 years ago, I discovered that, it's eminently bikeable from Brooklyn to Lincoln Center to the Fordham campus. It takes about 50 minutes. And it has only gotten easier over the years as New York City's system of bike paths has improved, and also as drivers have gotten more used to seeing a lot of bikers. But it's a gorgeous ride because I come over the Brooklyn Bridge and then cross Manhattan near the tip, near Chambers Street, way downtown, and then it's a straight shot up the Hudson River bike path, an entirely protected bike path, all the way from downtown up to 59th Street. So that whole ride is right along the Hudson. And then I bike up the hill to Fordham. And so it's a gorgeous bike route. My challenge is that I have so many early morning events and late evening events that I don't get to do it that often. So over the summers, I do it a lot. But when school is in session, there's something, either early or late almost every day, and therefore it's very hard to do it. It's about 9 miles each way.
And do you have a private shower in your suite?
So I do actually, so that's a huge perk that there is a shower here.
But you didn't install it.
No, I didn't install it. And I only really need it in July and August, when it's super hot. Otherwise, it's fine.
And do you otherwise do it year round, biking?
Uh, so to otherwise bike the year round, I mean, no, I would say I drop off in the winter, but biking through the fall is great, and I would be biking now. It's a gorgeous day here in New York, but again, I've got an evening event out on Long Island, so today's not going to be a bike day.
Duty calls. Well, as we draw the conversation to a close, I want to ask you a question, but also give you a chance to close with in whatever way you want. And the question is the question that you asked President Tetlow. What is the most important thing to you about leadership? But also talk more broadly about what you would like to leave our viewers with.
What I'd like to what? What's
Leave
the
our viewers with.
Okay, so I think the most important thing about leadership, I think, is trust. And if people trust you, then they can absorb a lot of bad news and negative decisions. If they don't trust you, then everything goes off the rails. And so I think it's critically important that a leader establish trust, kind of with all the different stakeholders, as many as possible. It's not always possible to establish trust with everyone, but I do think, building trust is really critically important, and that is something done over time. And and so therefore people need to know that that you're being straight with them, and they need to have the feeling that you're being straight with them, and that and that when you promise something, you're committed to following through on it. And if you can't follow through on it, it has to be such that they trust you, so that they know when you say you can't do it, they believe you because you've got a track record. And so I think it's very hard to get anywhere without establishing trust through an institution. Couple more points. One is just as a manager to let people do their jobs, to understand that I can't be as good as, at placing students as our dean placement, or admissions as our dean of admissions, or dealing with students as crisis as our head of student affairs, or figuring out the academic schedule as well as our associate dean of academics. So don't do everyone's job. Let them do their jobs. And sometimes they'll make decisions that are different than the ones I would have made. And I generally live with that and view that as, if you want people to trust you and have the confidence to make their own decisions and to have people develop trust in them, you have to give them the freedom and ability to do that.
Thank you very much. And as we close, all the best for this last semester. Have a great trip to Milan, and look forward to following you in your career closely in the next chapter.
Thank you, Daryl. It's been great talking with you. And I feel I don't get to hold forth and expound that often on these issues, so I appreciate it a lot.
Thank you. And thank you for being part of this series.